Good morning to one and all.
Good morning,
For the
brother.
benefit of few participants, I would like to give an introduction about Vidyadeep College. This is the only institute that caters to the inherent and definite need of the religious brothers of various congregations. Initially, the institute offered a 2-year diploma program in theology and allied subjects. This program continued for around 15 years. Thereafter, the offered courses came to be known as Bachelor's Degree in Religious Sciences, which is affiliated to Dharmaram Vidyaketanam, Bangalore. Now, this Vidyadeep College upgraded as higher institute as a master in theology. On behalf of Vidyadeep College, I welcome Brother Paul Raj, SD, Principal of Vidyadeep College, the resource person. A warm welcome to you, dear brother. I cordially welcome the bishops, superior generals, and other major superiors, sisters, brothers, and priests from different congregations and dioceses, teachers, and well-wishers of Christian institutions. And special welcome the participants from other countries like Italy, Africa, Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, and Nepal. I wholeheartedly welcome all the respected participants who showed their great interest to join this webinar titled Challenges for Christian Education in the Cyber Age and Post-COVID Context of India. In the middle of this COVID-19 pandemic, we meet a lot of challenges, yet we choose to work on. Following the same, this webinar aims to deal with such challenges during the pandemic COVID-19 for Christians as teachers. I request all your patience listening throughout the webinar. I wish you all the best. Have a fruitful seminar. Thank you, dear friends. Now I welcome Brother Basil, petition brother, to introduce our resource brother, Brother Paul Raj.
Good morning, everyone. The topic for our webinar is very relevant. We are aware of the COVID-19 and its impact on all of us. We also know how it is affecting our educational system, rhythm, and future. We as Christian educators need to be in the forefront on what affects our children, our people, and our educational ministry. So this topic is timely as it will deal with 3 important issues. First, the impact of social media, especially during this lockdown period, on our young generation. Secondly, it will highlight the pandemic COVID-19 and its impact and challenges on our Christian education. Thirdly, the talk will portray how the early church responded to such pandemic and what lessons we as educators learn from this pandemic called COVID-19. Now, Dr. Brother Paul Raj, the presenter for today, is a member of the Montfort Brothers of St. Gabriel, Bengaluru province. He has held various responsible roles in the congregation. He was a formator for many years, including novice director and also taught in schools and facilitated numerous skill development programs in schools. He was in the provincial council before was appointed as the provincial of Trichy province, and recently he completed his term of office in the international leadership team as general assistant. Brother Paulraj has qualified in many fields like theology, political science, journalism, and he has a PhD from the University of Madras. He has put all his expertise into practice by conducting seminars, presenting lectures, and being member of many educational religious forums. He has published many articles and papers presented in national and international conferences. As an author, he has written many books in English and Tamil, like The Heart of Living, Culture over Christ, Matters of the Heart, and an edited work on the skills of teachers by him is to be published soon. With these few words, I invite Brother Paulraj to commence his presentation. Brother Paulraj.
Good morning to everyone. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, yes.
All right. So if I am not clear or there is some problem in listening to me, you can always send a private message, chat. If you go to the right-hand side upper corner there, you will see chat. So if you don't hear me well, you can send a message, Brother Paulraj, I am not able to hear you. Okay, so let me thank Brother Francis, Edward Francis, Brother Basil, a patrician brother, for the words of welcome and for the introduction. I am very much tempted to say hello to each one of you here, but this is not the forum because I'm seeing some of your faces after a long time. And many of you have taken a new transfiguration has taken place, including myself. I am sporting a French beard. Some of you are already sending a message, your beard is good. Thank you. So nice to see you all. And let me thank you for coming in for a very important topic like this. I shall keep you occupied till 12:40. So from 12 or even before. So from 12:40 is a time for questions, supplements or compliments or clarification, etc. At 1 o'clock, we shall wind up. All right. Now, this topic that we thought is especially to target the larger canvas called Christian groups. So there are not only Catholics here, there are people from other denominations. I wish to especially welcome them, and from the other countries. So therefore, I shall focus this topic to about 2 or 3 very important areas. One is, very briefly, what is education and what is Christian education? This is to situate ourselves in the context. So from there, I shall move on to how this Christian education is being impacted by this cyber age and the related issues, the impact, and what Christian education must take into account. Then we come to the most important section is the post-COVID-19 context for India. We are actually the current COVID-19 context, but we are looking a little ahead. How long it is going to be, we don't know. When does this post-COVID begin? No one knows. And therefore, this post-COVID-19 context, what are the educational challenges? And particularly, what are the challenges for Christian education? So this is what I am planning to share with you this morning. Okay, now to begin, sometimes you may not see me because I will be using the PowerPoint, and therefore you can now and then click and see, but I will mostly using the PowerPoint for your benefit. Okay, are you able to see the slides? Anybody? Since all of your microphone is muted.
Yes, yes.
Okay, that's fine. All right.
Yes.
It is good that one or two of you keep your microphone on, provided you don't give us a background music. All right. So to begin with, this is the topic that I was talking about. And you have the program there that I just a little while ago shared with you. Okay, this is the plan that I shared with you, that what I am going to share with you this morning. And therefore, let us go straight away into the topic. What is education? Education is not preparation for life. Education is life itself. Now, this is said by John Dewey, an American philosopher and an educational reformer. Roosevelt says, to educate a man in mind and not in morals is to educate a menace to society. And Skinner says, education is what survives when what has been learned has been forgotten. I think these don't need any explanation. Now, I think these are more powerful than what I could explain as what is education. So some are saying what is not education, and the others are saying what is education. And Jim Henson, he says, kids don't remember what you try to teach them. They remember what you are, which means the person of the teacher. C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis was a British scholar and a lay theologian. And he says, education without values, as useful as it is, seems rather to make a human being a more clever devil. Mark Twain. Mark Twain was an American humorist and a very famous American writer. He says, I have never allowed my schooling interfere with my education. He says, the school, he doesn't seem to consider the schools as a place of education. You educate a man, you educate a man. You educate a woman, you educate a generation. And therefore, the importance of the education of the girl child. And Aristotle, the famous philosopher, he says, educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all. It's a very powerful. So then, what is education? So the definition of education guiding most of our schools today is the delivery of knowledge, skills, and information from teachers to students. This is the normal guiding principle. Now, this mistaken idea of what true education is and how it can be achieved is the root problem in the mainstream education today, including, I would say, Christian education. Okay, so we can propose that behind all the differences of opinion about what it means to be educated is one very basic idea that is predominant. And that is, if you ask who is an educated person, the general answer is an educated person is someone who perceives accurately, thinks clearly, and acts effectively on self-selected goals. And some people go a little further and say, besides this, the insiders in the schools, which you can call as a stakeholders, teachers, students, helpers, collaborators, the parent-teacher association, PTA, and the local public, panchayat or the village. They all must participate effectively in the learning and education environment. This is what some people say education is. Okay. Let me come now to what is this Christian education that we are talking about. I think I have to clarify certain concepts and understanding in this before we go into the main topic. So what is Christian education? People have heard of Christian schools, but what does it mean to have Christian education? What does it mean, a Christian school? So is the education any different? Actually, all forms of education will have a particular perspective on life that all of us know. And no form of education is neutral, as it will always be providing a particular lens through which the student sees the world and his or her place in it. So, the Christian school offering education, let us say Christian education, it seeks to teach a way of life every day through all that is done and taught. Every day, a way of life. Now, some of you might ask a question, what is this way of life? So what is that way? So Christian education invites young people to see and understand the world through the perspective of God's truth. And second, it is a biblical vision for life, where the world is created and sustained by God, and where God has acted in history through Jesus Christ, and the world is advancing towards a new creation. But however, Christian education is not just about a Christian way of understanding. It is also about a Christian way of living, about which I shall speak later. A Christian way of living is a life dedicated to serving God and fellow human beings, which means it goes beyond all religions. And therefore, Christian education informs, invites, and inspires young people to live this way of life. Now, we can say, what are the principles of Christian education? I give here some 5 principles very briefly. The first is, Christian education has its foundation in the creator-creature relationship taught in the scripture. The father-son, the father-daughter. And the second principle is, human beings are religious beings. The first book, Genesis 1:27. And the third principle, true education has its beginning, initiation in the fear of the Lord, which is the beginning of wisdom. And the fourth is, education is the nurture or bringing up the whole person, what we call as a holistic education or integrated education or total education. I think each congregation or diocese or a group, you have a different names for it. And the last principle is, the responsibility for education does not rest on the school alone. It rests upon the parents, the family, the church, the school, and the significant others. Okay. Now, having said that, it's very interesting. I went to this 1968, the Indian National Policy on Education, the 1968 Indian government policy. Article number 3 of that policy in 1968, that is soon after the Second Vatican Council. It says, very beautiful, there are 5 elements which are very important. The government of India is convinced that a radical reconstruction of education is essential, and this will involve a transformation of the system to relate it more closely to the life of the people. That means educational system closely linked with the ordinary people, number 1. Number 2, a continuous effort to expand the education opportunity for all, number 2. Number 3, a sustained and intensive efforts to raise the quality of education at all stages, number 3. And 4, an emphasis on the development of science and technology. Remember, it's 1968 we are talking about. And lastly, and the cultivation of moral and social values. This is the proclamation of the Government of India in 1968 education policy. And if you see there at the bottom, I have given the document Decree on Christian Education, Gravissimum Educationis, Second Vatican Council, 1965. We have some of these Indian government's policy vision are present in those document of the Second Vatican Council. So I would like to show how probably our policy makers in India would have taken some inspiration from the Second Vatican Council document. That is just to show that how the Christian influence is there. Okay. Now let me come to something very, very important. What is the uniqueness of Christian education? What is uniqueness that we are talking about? So I would like to ask a fundamental question is, what is that one aspect or one uniqueness that runs through all our Christian educational institutions in India? And even those who are non-Christians who are present in this group here today, you can just pause this question. What is that one aspect or uniqueness that is running through your Christian educational institution that you can call as something a hallmark or a trademark or a Christian educational identity? Or to pose the question differently, what is the pedagogy of Christian educational institution in India? Or what is your diocesan or congregational educational policy or pedagogy? So for some of us, it is excellence. For others, it is quality education. For some others, it could be holistic education, total education. Yet for some others, it is a pedagogy of the heart. But for the majority, it is results. So pure results. So the next question, should something distinguish Christian education from other education? If yes, what is that? What are the current trends in Christian education in India? Are there any trends at all? Are we able to see it? What must be or should be the focus of a Christian or Catholic education of the future in India? Now I am raising certain fundamental questions for you to reflect. Now, very interestingly, I was lucky to read through this book. A person by name Ernest David Burton, an American biblical scholar and who became the president of the University of Chicago, he visited India in 1908, spent some time in India, did a survey analysis of the status of Christian education in India, and he published in the American Journal of Theology on the topic, the status of Christian education in India. I found some very interesting details I want to share with you very briefly. He says, that is in 1908, the Christians were about 30 lakhs in India, 1% of the whole population. And he says out of which 10 lakhs were Roman Catholics. And he says in 1908, there were 44 colleges, 260 secondary schools, besides number of elementary schools managed by Christians in India. And very interestingly, he says, there were 1,69,000 young people from Christian community, which means Christians, who were in school studying at that time. That number was 4 times bigger than children from other religions. And for me, it's a very, very big eye-opener. And he says, I'm quoting him, quote Bernard, though a small number of Christians in India, Christianity is today means 1908, if not the greatest, one of the greatest moral forces making for the welfare of India. This is done especially through Christian schools and Christian institutions. I'm exactly quoting Ernest Burton, unquote. And he continues, the other religions have modified their ideals and practices under the influence of Christianity. And he says, this they confess even while remaining strenuous opponents of Christianity. That we see it even today. It has not changed. And therefore, we should not be bothered. If they are offering a narrative, we should be ready with a counter narrative. That Christian education goes beyond religions, caste, and creed, etc., etc. If a particular group of people or political party is accusing us of this, we Christians should have a counter narrative, which is not correct. So in 1908 itself, these accusations were there against us. So we should not bother. And this Burton is quoting a Hindu professor who wrote in 1910. He says, I'm quoting that professor, Hindu professor, to speak the truth, the prosperity of modern India is entirely due to the benevolent efforts of Christianity by setting up schools and colleges, by lifting the downtrodden classes, and by removing superstition of the upper classes, unquote. And what I like most is, I have put in a bold the sentence by Ernest Burton. He says, there is every prospect that Christianity will be a factor in the educational situation in India for an indefinite time to come. This is a prophecy by him. Now only we have to decide and see what is that indefinite time. Okay, and it's a very valuable document I came across. Now, in 1997, Congregation for Catholic Education, CCE, they published a document, Rome, Vatican, the Catholic school on the threshold of third millennium. Now they say the Catholic school participates in the evangelizing mission of the church and is the privileged environment in which Christian education is carried out. And they say in this way, number 11, Catholic schools are at once places of evangelization, of complete formation, of inculturation, of apprenticeship in a lively dialogue between young people of different religions and social backgrounds. Which means when they say it is a place of evangelization, it is not a place of conversion, as some people accuse us of. It is a place of formation, inculturation, and a place of learning moral values. The church is very clear. So evangelization cannot be looked at in a very narrow sense. Okay. Now let us come to 2017, the CBCI, Conference of Catholic Bishops in India, All India Catholic Education Policy, 2017. They are saying the major goal and mission of our Catholic education in India is social and societal transformation. And they are quoting the 2000 document, the last line you see, education, that is Catholic education, is committed to a new society built on justice, peace, love, and harmony. A civilization of love. It's a very beautiful document, a very beautiful educational policy of the Conference of Bishops in India. So you see a very gradual progression, a very gradual movement. And the CBCI policy also says the purpose of education is to transform society. So education has been a major concern for the church as she perceives it as an essential tool for the full development of individuals and empowerment of people, especially the poor and the marginalized. And the document goes on. And you will see that basic cause for the continuing gross inequality in India is the very low level of educational attainments among a large percentage of our priority groups, namely Dalits, tribals, women, and the deprived categories of the OBCs. So very clearly, the Catholic Church policy on education. Now the church is giving some 7 important strategic options, I think, which is relevant for everybody. I will very briefly run through, I will not explain. The first is, this document is considering education ministry as a spiritual ministry of service. Second, B, it says the quality of education is integral that is physical, intellectual, emotional, social, spiritual, etc. Total education. Number 3, this Catholic education is education of quality and relevance to the marginalized. Number 4, I have purposely put in a green. It says, using the technological and pedagogical advance of today for learning and for empowerment. That's how technology is important. And 5, education for sensitivity to the pluralistic nature of our Indian cultures, culture, religions, caste, language, etc. And the next, priority to the critical role of leadership. We should not be busy with the administration. We should be busy with educational innovation, it says. And the next is ecology, commitment to care for nature. And the next one talks about gender sensitivity, gender equity and equality. I talks about value-based learning. And the last one is education to nurture culture of faith in the Catholic students and spiritual formation to all other students from other religions. So it talks about the faith formation. Okay, so I have briefly placed before you what is education, what are the fundamentals of Catholic education. Now we come to something very important. The second part actually, or we can say third part, is the cyber age and its impacts today. Is my speed okay? Am I rushing through? All right.
You can proceed.
Good.
Okay. I don't see any chat message, and I think all of you are attentive. Yes, I see some of you smiling well.
Yes,
Yes.
brother. You can also enlarge the slide, this presentation view.
Okay. All right. Okay. Okay. So therefore, we are going to the next one. Cyber age, its impacts today. Okay. Now, this is a very important section. I think many have been asking me to work on that. So I will speak on that very briefly. Now this, especially during this lockdown period, this has become a very serious matter. I will touch upon a little later. So therefore, let me straight away go into what is this cyber age or cyberspace, and go into which generation is much affected, and psychosocially, what are the changes taking place? What are the challenges for education? Okay. Now, if you notice, are you able to see this? The Facebook, founded in 2004, the users are 2.6 billion in 2020. Now, the Twitter, founded in 2006, you have about 330 million users and 145 million daily users today. WhatsApp, it was founded in 2009, bought by Facebook in 2014. We have 2 billion users in 180 countries in the world. I think many of us here in this webinar, we come under this category. We are all busy forwarding groups. And the last is Instagram, came into existence in 2010, about 1 billion users. You see these statistics is mind-blogging, enormous usage. Okay, now what is this cyberspace or cyber world? So the cyber world or cyberspace is more than just the internet. It refers to an online environment where many participants are involved in social interaction and have the ability to affect and influence each other. So people interact in cyberspace through the use of digital media. Now some examples of the cyberspace interaction. You see there are 3 things happening. One is some people create create media. We take photograph, videos, or document, etc. and we create them. And we share them. We upload, what do you say, the center? We upload photographs, videos, write, repost, forward, inform, etc. And the third, we consume. You read, others read it, they see it, they view email message, they post comments, on social networking sites and blogs, etc., etc.
Varghese
So you see
Mandapam
that.
ഉണ്ട്. Varghese
So,
Mandapam
so these
കേൾക്കുന്നുണ്ടല്ലോ.
are
ജിനി കുര്യാക്കോസ്.
these are the way we use cyberspace. Okay. Now you see today, lots of people, you see the weight on the left side. People have been using this for playing mobile games, playing massively on multiplayer, online games, watching videos, movies, surfing social websites, chatting online, etc. And as a result, of the right side, going out of the family has reduced, sitting with the community has reduced, meeting with the friends has reduced, sleeping has reduced, exercise is reduced, studying, eating, etc., etc., reduced. All right. This is what the normal we see it. We don't need to explain too much on that. Now, how do people manage themselves during this impact of this social media, or what you call the excessive activity in cyberspace? There is a losing sleep. They feel bored. They feel stressed. They feel tired. They feel achy. Back pain, neck pain, elbow pain, eye pain, headache, excessive screen time, losing focus in studies, losing track of time, feeling less love from family members and friends, etc., etc. So people find difficult to really manage themselves online. All right. Now, who is that group which is very vastly affected in this? Now, this is something very important, especially for Christian education. Now, in this talk, I'm going to specifically focus on this generation Z, X, Y, Z. All right. This generation Z, who is that generation? What is that generation? This generation Z is defined as those who are 7 to 22 years old last year. Though chronologically no endpoint final decision has been taken about this, normally it is defined generation Z are those born between 1997 to 2012. I think most of you who are in this webinar, you may not come under this category. Most of us. All right. Now this is generation Z. Now there is one generation called silent generation, those who are 74 to 91 years old. Those who are born between 1928 to 45. The next is called boomers. Boomers, that was a time population boom took place, who are 55 to 73 years old. That is born between 46 to 64. Generation X, they are 39 to 54 years old. Those are born between 65 to 1980. The next one is called millennials. Those who are 23 years to 38 years old, you are called millennials, born between 1981 to 96. Then that is generation Z, about whom we are talking now. After this, those who are born from 2012 and those are going to be born till 2024, they are called generation Alpha. They say it is a very dangerous generation. This generation will not eat food without seeing a LED screen. All right, this generation. And it is this generation who is in our kindergarten classes and in our primary or pre-primary. And the next generation going to be born from 25 to 2039, they are called generation Beta. All right, not Hindi Beta, generation Beta. Now this is the roughly a calculation for you to understand this. And you will notice this generation Alpha and the generation Z, they come under all our Catholic or Christian schools and colleges. Okay. Now, very briefly about this Gen Z. This Gen Z will comprise 32% of the total global population. But in India, it is about 472 million. According to 2014 UN report, India this year, we have the largest youth population in the world, between 10 to 24 year old. And by 2020, that means now, India is the world's youngest country with 64% of its population in the working age group, according to the report in the Hindu. All right. So it's to give you an idea of what is the type of generation going through our institution. So this graph will give you what I have been talking about. All right. This particular chart will show you. All right. Maybe later on you can download it from the website. We will tell you later on. Okay. Now, what is this psychosocial characteristic of this Gen Z and their style of learning? Because it's very important for Christian education. These Gen Zers, the Gen Zers are digital natives. That means they were born when the smartphone came into the world. Therefore, they are actually digital natives. I think you and I, we are digital migrants. Okay, you and I are digital migrants. We are like the migrants on the road now. I think most of us belong to another generations, other generations. We are all migrants. So they are digital native influencers, but most of us are digital migrants. And the second quality is this Z generation is a smartphone generation. So they make smarter use of social media. You would have noticed how some kids, very small ones, sometimes our nephews and nieces or grandchildren or children in the KG class, how they make use of the smartphone so swiftly and rapidly compared to us. And number three, this Gen Z, they are more political. You can see them participating in the political rallies, especially in the recent Black Lives Matter, and in many programs that are pro-people program, you can see them participating. And they are more diverse. They are open to diversity. And number four, this generation is technology is their DNA. It is their part of their blood, technology. And therefore, Christian education has taken this into account. And number five, this Gen Z is a stark contrast to all the earlier generations, which means born before 1997. So don't be surprised that they are different from us and totally strange from us. And number six, this Gen Z expect greater flexibility in learning, in study, in timetable, in work, in class schedule, etc. They want greater flexibility. They don't like stereotyped practices. And number seven, this Gen Z are not tied to gender norms. The boy will dress up as a girl, girl will dress up as a boy, and they are very gender friendly. They are very open. All these are there. And they are more self-reliant. They are not more dependent like us before. They are independent. And there are many more. I only highlighted some. Okay. Now, keeping this as a backdrop, I would like to very briefly see some of the very important characteristics that affect our Christian or education as a whole. Number one, this Gen Z are very good at integrating virtual and offline experience. For them, both are same. They are digital natives. They are very comfortable with the technology, the internet. They are very comfortable with the social network. And they are feeling at home online. Their social life most of the time takes place online, and they don't see a difference between offline and online. So I think it's a very important psychosocial difference we see in them. They're very good at integrating these two, but for us it's very difficult. You can notice many of our students in our schools, they will have their earphone, they'll be doing their homework or studying for exam, music will be going on, they'll be scratching their cat or the dog, they'll be texting messages in their Facebook, and they can do 101 things at the same time, and that is this generation. But when you and I, with the music, we cannot study. No noise for us. We don't tolerate noise. We can do only one thing at a time. Okay. And the second, this Gen Z has a multiple identities. They don't get stuck with the one idea, one truth. We come across, they're shifting their positions constantly. They'll move from religion to religion, ideology, party to party, etc. They're quite comfortable. So some people say they are somewhat like identity nomads. They have multiple identities. Number three, they are very communaholic. That means they can accept different truth at the same time. They are very good at connecting to different truths different ideas. It is like one girl said, we each have our own style and our own way of being. But what binds us is that we accept and understand everyone's styles. A 16-year-old girl told me. They are very comfortable, communaholic. Number 4, this Gen Z have a positive qualities. They are radically very inclusive. They don't distinguish between friends online and friends offline. They take even Facebook friendship very seriously. You know, many stories we read in the newspapers. They value online communities. And then is that think it is natural for every individual to belong to different groups. They are very comfortable with that. And the most problematic for us as educators is sexually, this Gen Z has seen everything. They flock to social media that I have mentioned there. They can post to text, images and videos anonymously and delete them when they want. But they forget that the digital footprint is never deleted. Police have access to it at any time. And this site that I have written there, it has about 95 million subscribers by April 2019. And it is said it had 21 billion video views, this site. And you have to see to believe. So as someone said, the previous generation to worry was about AIDS. But this Gen Z worry is the police. This is something that we need to really understand this. But a positive one is this Gen Z, they value teamwork, they like consensus, they want to take a decision making together, etc. They value diversity. Number 8, the Gen Z expect everything on demand because touch a button, they have a connection to Google. They want everything on demand. They are impatient compared to other generation. It is just that for them, it is normal not to wait. Impatient. For us, it is normal to wait, but for them, no. And the Gen Z social life takes place online. And you will notice their language is not English language or what we use. They speak through emojis. I have given a simple example of 3 emojis. They speak through emojis. This generation, they like video better. They are happy to read online, but they prefer to watch. Their attention deficiency is a great concern. And very interestingly, the Gen Z is an always on generation. They are online. They prefer online. So it's a dramatic shift from a previous generation. So this being always online affects their youth behavior, their attitudes, their lifestyle. So this online mentality will have some type of deep impacts on the young minds later. And solutions, they think they have solutions to problem at their fingertips, but actually no. But they think they know everything. And therefore, now very briefly, what are the challenges for Christian education of this Gen Z? First is, we must understand that the Gen Z style of learning. We need to understand. Second, the Gen Z prefer online type of study, hands-on experience, more visual than text. They don't prefer textbook. They don't like long lectures. And third, the Gen Z students are not today passive learners. They want to be part of learning process. They want to participate, classroom discussion, group discussion, debates. Number 4, Christian education must know that technology, creativity, and hands-on experience is the future. It's very important. Number 5, Christian education has to become sensitive to technology in the classroom. What do I mean by that? That every child must have access to gadgets and internet. We have heard of 2 or 3 reported incidents in the papers. A girl in Kerala who committed suicide because she had no access to internet or classroom online classes. And in West Bengal yesterday, the father of the girl child committed suicide that he could not provide a smartphone to his daughter to attend online class. These are only reported. So sensitivity. Therefore, Christian education must see that it is not enough to introduce online classes, that technology, gadgets is made available and affordable for the poor and marginalized students. Number 6, Christian school teachers must be top influencers in this technological age. This is very important because the Gen Z, they say teachers still as the top influencers for their personal development. They don't consider technology. Second only, they say YouTube. The first top influence is teachers, and the second top influence is YouTube, they say. Okay. Number 7 challenge is Christian education has to be packaged well, because Christian education is still sought after in India. We are still wanted. So we can package Christian education and Christian learning in a very attractive manner using this technology. And number 8, it's a very important one. The recent survey says the Gen Z, their attention span is only 8 seconds, it seems. Only 8 seconds. So very important how Christian education institution, how to take this account, especially in designing our curriculum. Because they rank YouTube ahead of lectures, learning application books. So very long homilies in the churches, very long advice, very long talks in the assembly, the school principals, very long instruction. How effective it is, you have to gauge them before this technology. Number 9, the Gen Z today spend up to 11 hours per day on social media. It will be more during this lockdown period. So after lockdown, it must have increased. How do we handle this? And the last is digital literacy for the Christian educators is a must. Digital literacy. Some of us are digitally illiterate. So digital literacy is very important for the Christian educators. Okay. Now let me come to the most important topic. The last part is post-COVID-19 educational challenges for India. I have divided it into 2-3 parts for us to understand. So therefore, let me proceed. Now, the novel coronavirus pandemic is causing a great pain. And the reason for it, we know, either handling or mishandling by the government of the day, affecting not only our economy, but the very livelihood of lakhs of Indians. And this COVID-19 has posed a very grave threat to India right from the time of the national lockdown. A great humanitarian crisis, unprecedented in India's modern history, has disrupted the lives of our people, especially the migrant workers. And many have reportedly died as a result of the lockdown, either due to exhaustion en route home, starvation, suicides, police excesses. We are very much familiar with this issue of Jairaj and Phoenix. Illnesses, rail and road accidents. As per reliable sources, about 667 non-COVID deaths have occurred across the country. It is more now. About 205 of these deaths have occurred among migrant workers on road, and 114 due to starvation and financial distress. This is statistics. But our people, our leaders have audacity to say that no one has died in India during this pandemic because of starvation. And without conscience, they are able to say it. Okay. I'm very happy. This Dushyant Dave, a senior advocate of Supreme Court and the president of Supreme Court Bar Association of India, he says, unilateral decisions without the advice of others. We have 2 classic examples, he says. One is demonetization was forced on the nation in November 2016, and the national lockdown on March 25th this year that was thrust upon 1 billion people of India at 4 hours notice. And he says, constitutional crisis in India. We must do something, he says. Imagine he is a president, Supreme Court Bar Association of India. Okay. Now, Let me briefly talk about education during pandemic. We go to after. This COVID-19 pandemic has intensified inequalities in the education system across the world. How do I say this? UNESCO report released last week. It says about 40% of low and lower middle income countries have not supported students at risk, especially the poor, linguistic minorities, and learners with disabilities. 40% of this income group. And this report, 2020 Global Education Monitoring Report that was published, it says, efforts to maintain learning continuity during the pandemic is horrific. It says, during the height of school closures, that is in April 2020, almost 91% of the students around the world were out of school. So 91% of the students were out of school by April. So what would have happened to this education? That is a big question, it says. And what are the responses of the education system to this? Number one, the education system responded with a distance learning solution. I think most of us went for online classes, all of which offered less or more imperfect substitute for classroom. Number two, many poorer countries opted for radio and television lessons. Three, around 55% of the low income, 73% of the lower middle income group, and 93% of the upper middle income countries, they went for online classes for primary and secondary education. India will come in, not even in the first category, even less than 55% below. And number four, not all students and teachers have access to adequate internet connection or equipment or skills or working condition to take advantage of these online classes. And number five, for poor students who depend on school for free meals or even free sanitary napkins, this closure of schools have been a major blow. That's a major blow, no midday meal. Number six, higher dropout rates are also a concern. It seems during an earlier Ebola epidemic in Africa, many older girls never returned to school once the crisis was over. And they say the same will happen to India in a post-pandemic period. So this 2020 Global Education Monitor report says, in order to combat this situation, 17% of low and middle income countries are planning to recruit more teachers. And in India, many are planning to send away teachers. And 22% to increase class time. And some are planning to introduce remedial classes when the schools reopen. This is what the report is telling. But how such classes are planned and targeted will be very critical to whether disadvantaged students can catch up. Now, I am sharing this so that the Christian education institutions are aware of this. And number 8, more important than this, the Global Hunger Index report of last year, it places India in 102nd position out of 117 countries surveyed. It's very sad. And earlier this week, a UNICEF report has predicted a terrible future for millions of Indian children, particularly the children of migrant workers. It says a large number of children who previously relied on midday meal lunch, such as the midday meal scheme in India, are no longer benefiting from these government schemes. And for many children in South Asia, these were the only meals they received in a day. Okay. Now this is the background. Now I'm coming very concretely, the challenges for Christian education post COVID-19. Now these are very grim pictures, and they will remind you how we in India handled this pandemic. The green picture, there are many more sad stories. Even now it is continuing. Even today we are seeing migrants traveling in their trains, and some are still on foot on the roads. Okay. Now, see something very interesting. I did a very small research in view of this webinar. How did this early church handle this epidemic, or what you call pandemic? The early church was no stranger to plagues or epidemics or mass hysteria. In fact, according to both Christian and non-Christian accounts, one of the main catalysts for the church's explosive growth in the early years was how Christians managed disease, suffering, and death, which means the way Christians managed epidemics and disease was a cause for the growth of the church in the past. And the church's response to the disease made a very strong impression on the Roman society. All right? Okay. Rodney Stark, in his book, The Rise of Christianity, it's a very ancient book, he gives some light on how the early church dealt with these kind of epidemics or pandemic or plague. In this book, he has one chapter on epidemics, network, and conversion. Now, he was a sociologist of religion. He talks about various epidemics that took place in the Roman Empire, particularly 165 years after Christ and in 251 AD. In these times, 2 plagues devastated the cities, Roman cities. And he says during that 2 plagues, the death rates were estimated to be between 7% to 50%. So killing a large number of people. So it was there even that time. And what can we learn from this Christian, how they responded during that epidemic? Number one, there was 2 bishops, Cyprian and Bishop Dionysius. These 2 helped people make sense of death and loss and reminded them of the hope of the resurrection. They also urged Christians to keep showing love and charity no matter what. He said, you Christians, go and help the people who are suffering. And this is what made the difference those days. The Christian community in the 2nd and 3rd century, they rallied to care for people in the face of death and disease, while pagan leaders and pagan family members, they fled for safety first. They ran away from the city. Galen, the most famous doctor in Rome during that time, reign of Marcus Aurelius, he ran away from Rome to reside in his wealthy country home because he was a pagan. Some writers say that many sick people were left behind in this plague. People died with no one to look after them. Like today, some of the Indians, the way they treat their COVID victims, the way they treat their doctors and nurses and health workers, the way they treat their relatives. In the ancient time, also pagans, there were many houses in which all the members died because of lack of any attention and treatment. But Christians did not react the same way. This is the beauty of it. Dionysius, an early bishop, he wrote a circular in an Easter letter to the Christians. Quote, most of our brother Christians showed unbounded love and loyalty, never sparing themselves and thinking only of one another. Heedless of danger, they took charge of the sick, ministering to them in Christ, and with them departed this life, for they were infected by others with the disease. Many in nursing and curing others transferred their death to themselves and died instead. And he continues, the best of brothers lost their lives. When he says best of brothers means best of people, men and women. A number of priests, deacons, and lay people. the result of great piety, strong faith, and in every way, the equal of martyrdom. So Bishop Dionysius says, all those people, those Christians who died in saving others, he says they were equal to martyrs. Now, Christians were powerful witnesses during pandemic those days. The hope of resurrection, love of God, love of people and charity helped the Christians to face these epidemics both spiritually and socially, whereas the pagan religion could not handle this. If non-Christian response to the plague was characterized by self-protection, self-preservation, and avoiding the sick at all costs, the Christian response was opposite. So it's very interesting to note in Wuhan, China, where COVID-19 seems to have originated, how Christians came together during this pandemic through social networking application called WeChat. It is somewhat like our WhatsApp. It's a Chinese app, WeChat. The Indian government has banned it now. So the Christians in Wuhan secretly, using this WeChat, they offered help and care to the patients and became a living proof of the best qualities of humanity. You can Google Wuhan Christians during pandemic. So very interesting testimonies you get there. So even in Wuhan, how Christians, despite the ban on religion, how they managed to care for the sick. Now the lessons from COVID-19 for Christian education in India today. In 362 AD, the pagan emperor called Julian, he tried to destroy Christianity. He tried to harm Christianity. He wrote to his people that the Christian growth was caused by their moral character and by their benevolence towards strangers and care for the graves of the dead. In another letter, he wrote that the Christians support not only their poor, but our poor as well. So he is writing to his people and he is urged the pagans to match the Christian practices. So it was found that after the epidemic, while reconstructing lives and relations with the people, the pagans would find it easier to make bonds with the Christians, since it was always easier to join a social network that is largely intact, which means during this epidemic time, people from other religions, they found it easier to communicate and relate with the Christian than with others, it is said, because they found the Christians had such a beautiful network. It was very intact, well coordinated. And therefore, what can we learn from our Christian history of the 2nd and 3rd century? That is my question. And another lesson we can learn is Christians know how to navigate, manage disease and suffering. One of the main catalysts for the church's explosive growth in the early years was how Christians managed disease, suffering, and death. So today, times of pain, persecution, and disaster is a time for a Christian or those who study in Christian institutions to automatically and spontaneously to get involved in the affairs of the world and of its peoples. I think very beautiful lesson we can learn from our early Christians. And next, serve in order to survive. So the survival of Christianity and of our Christian values and principles depend on to what extent we involve in charity and in the love of one another, especially during the times of disaster and disease. I wish to quote the Matthew 25, the chapter 25, the last judgment scene. So how our schools and the colleges can enable the stakeholders, the students and the parents, to practice these values is a very big challenge. That to survive, we need to serve. And next, when I was hungry, you gave me food to eat. Emperor Julian, he urged the pagans to match Christian practices. So Christians of early days, they helped each other, and this greatly reduced death, mortality, because simple nursing saved lots of lives. So we need to salute those religious sisters and the nurses who are round the clock working in the hospitals, clinics, and nursing homes to care for the sick and especially those who are dying. So the simple provision of food and water will allow persons who are temporarily too weak to cope to recover instead of perishing miserably. And our credibility as Christians or as Catholics depends on how we respond now and post-pandemic. So it was found that after the epidemic, while reconstructing their lives in the early church, the pagans would find it easier to make relationship with the Christians. So the Catholics are so well organized, and for that matter, the Christians in India, not only in India, all over the world, we are so organized from top to bottom with a certain amount of honesty, transparency, integrity. No other social structure in the world is so well organized like our Catholic system or Christian system for such a long period and functioning so effectively. 2000 years, a social system. You tell me any other organization that is functioning so effectively, powerfully, creditably for 2000 years. Now, this is a very great witness to the rest of the society. So our educational institutions can strive for greater efficiency, integrity, transparency, and accountability. Now, this is very important. This is very, very important. And another very important point that we need to stress is building resilience and hope among our students and the stakeholders. It is our duty. For example, the post-COVID-19 context, the focus of Christian education institution in India normally will be online classes and online interview. Now, I think we cannot stop with this. So Catholic or Christian educationists like you and me, we are called upon to respond creatively to the post-COVID-19 situation. So it calls for preparing our stakeholders, our parents, our alumni to go beyond, to love and serve others, to spread gospel hope in times of despair, to work towards building resilience, and to develop compassion towards one another. I think this is very, very important. And this another major element that we need to keep in mind is sensitivity to digital divide. I use the word Christian sensitivity, especially those of us who introduced online classes in our schools. Christian education to be very sensitive about the digital divide and take proactive steps to make sure that there is no digital discrimination practiced in our schools. If many of our students cannot afford to have a gadget or connectivity for online class, what are we going to do about that? Our Christian institutions cannot encourage this. We cannot digitally marginalize anybody. That is called digital discrimination. I use the word. So instead, because many of our students in our village or remote school, they are coming from mountain areas, very interior villages, faraway villages, no connectivity, no network, sometimes no electricity. How do you expect them to attend online class? So we must work for reducing the digital gap. No child should be deprived of the opportunity to have access to digital technology or to online program. Now, how to do it? How to do it? That is a big question on our part. So today there is a big rush to switch on to online classes. Now the impact of online classes, nobody knows, because in India, nobody has made any study so far. As far as my knowledge goes, nobody has made a study of the impact of online classes. But the courts have banned online classes from KG to 5th standard in some states. So education is not about information or content. Most of the time, it takes place through social interaction in the school with the friends and teachers. And psychologists say lack of interaction socially with the teachers and students, it will affect the development of a child. At the same time, we cannot say we cannot have online classes, because what we do understand is if we do not have online classes, we will be hampering the child's brain development, some say. In early childhood, the child's brain develops every day, it seems. So 3 months, if a child has no access to learning, we cannot afford to miss this time of learning. Some education is safe. So we are in a dilemma. Therefore, throw open existing structures to bridge the digital gap. So the parishes, pastoral centers, religious houses located in the parish locality, other church structures located in the vicinity of the poor could welcome the poor and the tribal students. They can make gadgets and internet available and accessible in these centers with the necessary facilities for our children.
Sorry.
Attend online classes.
What is lecture is very good. Very
Competitive
good.
exams and life skills for sessions in order to bridge the digital gap in our structured school system. I think in this connection, I would like to mention, we are seeing that how, I think I'm talking about later, how in Jharkhand, one village, the village Panchayat has arranged for speakers in the villages for children to listen to online classes. They are broadcasting. It's a very beautiful Indian method. Okay. The next is not directly related to education, but very important is we are all aware of a recent this movement called Black Lives Matter. How in the US, one Afro-American was literally murdered by a police officer with his knees on his neck. I can't breathe. You're all very familiar with that. So as we are waging a war against COVID-19, we are also witness to anti-racial protest, rallies and movements for equality in our world. India was largely silent on this for many reasons, but thank God in the recent incident of police excesses in Tuticorin on the issue of Jayaraj and Phoenix matter, we need all Indians matter, like Black Lives Matter, all Indians matter movement. The Indian church, beginning with a hierarchy, the religious leadership, the priest and the religious must use this opportunity of this Black Lives Matter in the US and conscientize on issues such as caste, linguistic, regional, racial and clannish mentalities that are crippling the Indian churches, the Protestant churches and the Catholic Church and religious life today, and strive for equality and Christian brotherhood that Christ preached. Matthew 23:8, you are all brothers and sisters. That is what this institute, Vidyadeep College, stands for. We stress on that. That is our motto. Okay. Now, Christian educators to become digital literates. I use the word digital literates. I already mentioned that earlier. So the situation demands, especially post-COVID-19, it demands that all Christian educators become gradually digital literates. We cannot complain anymore that we did not have access to the latest gadgets and technology, and therefore remain illiterate. Times have changed, and we all must make a shift from digital illiteracy to intelligent and effective use of technology. At the same time, aware of fake news. All right? Yes. Someone is busy drawing something, so I do not know how to remove that. Okay. Now let me come to the last part. I have some 10-15 minutes. The post-COVID-19 common concerns, not only Christian concerns, common concerns. Now there is a large section of the population in India that is unable to access technology, and that is a huge concern. I think those listeners from Africa, there are some listeners from Kenya and Tanzania. I include your country also in that. Unable to access technology, and some remotest mountain parts in India, the northeastern parts are remote Chhattisgarh and Jharkhand, etc. Or maybe some the northeast of Malaysia, etc. or Thailand. These are mountain areas. So children belonging to migrant families might have moved far away from their schools now. Lakhs of them in India. I saw in the papers recently that a government school teachers in Delhi were trying to contact some of the students whose mobile numbers they have, but they are not able to reach them. They say the students have disappeared. That means they are not there in Delhi. And these are kids who are going to be out of school very soon. So we don't know whether these migrants' families will return to the cities and what is going to happen to them. It's a very big question. It's a common concern. The third concern, all the policies of our government, they tend to focus on those who already have access to certain facilities. And we just forget the invisible, the poor and the marginalized. And according to me, Christian schools just cannot go that way of the government. So number 4, if we stop the online education, even the children who have access to technology will lose out. Yes, that is clear. But instead, Christian schools need to work on providing technology to those disadvantaged children. And some NGOs are already working on these issues. They are providing smartphones, electronic gadgets, tablets, and teaching children to make use of technology. I'll be very happy if Christian education can enter into this area also. Number 5, can Christian education think this way? The government has not thought of investing in education in a way that it can take care of a situation like this, that is pandemic or post-pandemic. The government has no policy. The courts in India are discussing today whether online class is useful or not useful, how damaging, how helpful, etc. Now, what about the post-COVID, post-pandemic? It will not come. So can Christian education think? So they have not thought on these lines. Christian education has to start thinking in these lines. There are so many organizations in India in the name of education. So thinking in such ways that we do not need to keep our schools closed in such times. Can our schools provide a safe environment even during pandemic? That is a question. How long this pandemic will go, we do not know. Some doctors say the middle of November is the peak period. And some other doctors say it is very difficult to predict the behavior of this coronavirus because it's a new virus. They don't know how it will behave. The second wave, nobody knows. So we need an action plan. Another most important post-COVID education need is preparing an action plan to deal with the students who have lost out on education because of the pandemic. They have not been able to even participate in an online class. Now there is a fear that majority of the students who were unable to access technology in this pandemic may become dropouts. And this goes against their fundamental right to education. So a school in Jharkhand village, I was told about that, arranged several loudspeakers in the village and taking 2 hours of classes daily, as all students can't afford smartphones to attend online classes. I like this creativity. Beautiful. So, another Christian, typically Christian plan. How about opening our schools, especially for the marginalized students first, instead of the others? Opening schools for the marginalized. So some socially minded educationists propose that it will be better to give priority to opening schools for the poor and the marginalized and migrant children first, as they might not have access to technology now. We can create a separate safe spaces for these children. I like this beautiful idea. I was reading in a research paper in an article in a paper. Instead of opening schools for everyone, opening schools first for the marginalized. Now, this is the last but most important element is cyber wellness and post-COVID-19. We know wellness, good health. We talk about physical wellness, mental wellness, etc. I use the word cyber wellness. Post-COVID-19 scenario is going to be very challenging for all of us as a whole and for education as a whole. Technology is going to play a very big role in the coming years and in the coming months. Now, it's very hard to predict the behavior of this COVID-19 virus. So hence, Christian education must be prepared for any eventualities. And most children have already got used to excessive screen use during this lockdown period. Excessive screen time, use of technology, particularly the social media and social networking sites during the lockdown period. It is said some are going through a new sickness called disease, nomophobia, N-O-M-O phobia. No mobile phone phobia, it is called nomophobia, new sickness. They feel depressed without mobile phone. They feel lonely without internet and Wi-Fi. They get discouraged. They go through depression. Their phone is not ringing, but the mind is conditioned to ring, and they take the phone and check, and the phone is not ringing. They are very upset. It is said 35 times a day, a youth in India checks his mobile phone to check whether there is any message or call. 35 times. I think there are some of us here in this webinar who do it more than 35 times. I know some of you will be smiling. I think we do that. It has become a really addiction. So excessive use of these will bring along with it necessary evils. That is neck pain, back pain, eye trouble, elbow pain, tennis elbow, joint pains, sleeplessness, distraction, loneliness, etc. So, cyber wellness and cyber health of our students have become a serious concern, especially when they return during the post-COVID-19 period to our schools. So how Christian education is going to handle this? So till now, virtual education was optional. So however, in the future, it will be fundamental. That is my opinion. It will be fundamental. So how are we going to handle this? How are we going to handle this? So this is a very serious concern. Therefore, I would like to conclude saying post-COVID-19 immediate concerns, how our schools actually can be made a space that is safe again for children to come back to. In other countries, they are reopening schools because they have taken utmost precautionary measures, like using tissue boxes for every class, clearing those boxes every day safely, taking temperature check of teachers, temperature check of students, temperature check of non-teaching staff, children sitting with a mask the whole day, which our children in India will not do, sitting with a mask the whole day without touching it or touching other children, etc. Then teachers not giving any books to the students to take it home, which means no homework. Some will be very upset. And social distancing strictly followed by the teachers and students during the school and after the school hours. Now, the greatest immediate concern is how to bring back all the children to the schools and reassure them, build up resilience, and be on track again. This is the government's concern and our concern too. I think I should end my talk with this. Now you see, you can download from that website this presentation. So you don't need to worry about this PowerPoint. So I take this opportunity to thank all of you for your patient listening. Now over to Brother Manuel. Over to Brother Manuel. Yes.
Yes. Yeah, it is. I thank Brother Paul Raj, the speaker. He has enlightened us. And it is a question session. You can post your question in the chat box. And since it's a virtual class, you cannot raise all at a time. You cannot raise the questions. So you can post, and we are collecting the questions, and we can give. Those who are following on YouTube, you can just send a message in the chat box or in the WhatsApp number which we have given, and we collect and we give to the speaker. Your questions will be answered. Thank you.
Yes, the one question here is, online classes do not cater to the emotional growth of the child, but with no sign of school reopening, what is the other alternative? I have answered this question. The alternative is not in our hands. It is in the hands of the government of India. Now, with regard to the effect or impact of online classes, nobody has made a study in India. All the studies that are available in the internet is the studies done in the US or Canada or in France. We have no study done in India. We have only some articles here and there appearing in the newspapers. So we have to wait for an impact study of online classes. But here and there, some students whom I have met, they say, we are fed up with the online classes. We want to get back to the school immediately. The reasons are, the parents are standing behind them during the online classes, and they cannot get up from their place. There is no social interaction. They are finding it very difficult. And secondly, they are used to sitting with this to listen to music or watch a movie, not serious stuff for too long. So the court in Bangalore has said, for the KG children, you can conduct class 15 to 20 minutes only online. For from classes 6 to 9, 20 minutes to 25 minutes. For the others, 25 to 35 minutes only. These are all ad hoc measures. So therefore, we have to wait and see.
Brother, another
Yes.
question has raised.
Yes.
Financial factor.
Please
Huge.
call out if there is a name, you can call out the person.
They are following in the YouTube.
Okay, yes.
Okay. Financial factor is huge. Huge constraint for many of the institutions which cater to the needs of the poor. In such a situations, how can the poor institution perform here?
Yeah, these are, we are not touching upon any financial question today. Our major Christian concern is not a finance. There are other major concerns. I think those financial concerns have to be dealt with the individual organization or churches. or what we call here in our case, delegation or province or congregations. Yes.
And
Any
someone
other
has-
who are on, yes, in the
Someone
Zoom,
has raised, yeah.
just a minute, Brother Manuel. Anybody in this Zoom group, if you have a questions, you can raise your hand. I can see it, or you can go to that more, click and raise a hand. We shall give preference to those who are on Zoom now, then go to the YouTube next. Anybody in a Zoom, please? Especially those who have switched on their video. I see some of them giving a very beautiful smile, but they don't ask questions. Yes. Yes, any other questions, please? Brother Varghese Mandapathil, I see you. You are getting ready to ask a question. Are you?
I already asked one and you answered that.
Okay, very good. Yeah, I saw that. Very good. Thank you. There is one question here. While explaining on Zen Izzat, you said how they are influenced by social media and virtual world. They also can't focus on more than 8 seconds. All right. But what is your question? Savary Anthony. Yes, you are not asked the question. All right. Yes, I think, Brother Manuel, there are no questions from Zoom.
Yes.
You can read from that YouTube. Yes.
Yeah, someone has raised the questions on offline class, offline digital class for small children. How do you comment on that?
Yeah, okay. I have answered that. I think Brother Dandraj is asking a question. I don't see him. Yes, Brother Dandraj. Brother Dandraj. Okay, I think you don't hear me. So you have a problem with your network.
And someone has raised the questions. Rao Prasad.
Brother Manuel, just hold on. Yes, Brother Savary Raj.
Yeah, brother, my question was that,
Yes.
see, when you are explaining about Izzatus, you
Yes.
told us that they are not able to focus even for 8 seconds, and
Yes.
this online world also affect them more.
Right.
In that case, when we are again going to approach them with this online classes, will it helpful to them, or it's again going to affect them, or are they able to achieve anything from these classes?
Right. So that's what I said. The impact of online classes, nobody has studied. But what they have studied is the impact of technology on this Gen Z. For example, especially those who are Generation Alpha, this generation seems to have an attention span of only 8 seconds. And therefore, they prefer learning through videos, YouTubes, and anything that is moving. So anything that is dynamic. So therefore, our curriculum designing has to take this seriously into account. And in that background, how far this online class, sitting in a place, listening to a lecture, no, it is not going to happen. Therefore, the pre-primary and in the kindergarten, they have a different set of curriculum. Even the court, I think Karnataka High Court has even specified what type of online lessons for the pre-primary should be done. They have given a guidelines. Yes. If you read day before yesterday's Hindu newspaper, they have given us some guidelines on that. Okay. As next question, Brother Manuel, anybody from
YouTube. How to train the teachers and religious to modern trends of education.
Brother Varghese, I am coming back to you afterwards. The teachers and the religious for the modern trend. I think I did not touch upon that topic here, though it is a separate topic to be dealt with. I have one important element I stressed is, I did not use the word religious, I said Christian educators. We need to become digital literates. Many of the religious, that especially the priests, sisters and brothers in India, we have become experts in forwarding. We live our life in the WhatsApp only. This forwarding I see even today, some religious are busy forwarding what took place 20 years ago. And they are forwarding as if it took place last night. Now, if we can simply forward this fake news and think that we are digitally connected, I think we are not. We are still digital illiterate. It's very important to learn use of technology for education, for evangelization. I think that's very important. Digital literacy is one important area where Christian educators have to equip themselves. Yes, Brother Verghese Mandapatil.
Yeah. Before Corona,
Yes.
which I call BC, we
Yeah.
asked the students to keep the mobile phone away from the school and away from them. The post-Corona, that is, after Corona, we are telling them the
Exactly.
school is in the mobile phone or
Exactly.
online. How
Right.
do you expect the children to cope up with this sudden change, and then how do you think they will be, realistically using it for educational purposes?
Correct. Yeah, yeah. I think it is actually the children are today, some children are really shocked because many schools have literally banned the mobile phone to be brought to the school. Even a few European countries had done that, but they have reverted back to asking children to bring their mobile phone or a tablet or a laptop to the schools. Now let me begin, since majority of the participants here are religious minded or religious and priest. Even in our training or formation period, our formees, the candidates, do not have access to technology, particularly this mobile phone. And we have totally banned this technology from the formation houses. Now, in one congregation, just 2 weeks prior to the first profession, the one who was in charge of what we call novitiate, she discovered 3 of them were secretly using a smartphone throughout the 2 years of novitiate, and she was shocked that they were using it secretly. She confiscated them. After a week, she found them with another gadgets, and their SIM cards, the top up was being done by their parents and relatives from their villages. And she said she was learning more through that technological device that was having secretly than what she was learning in the class that was given by her novice mistress. Now, many congregation seminaries have banned use of this stuff. Now, what is important is how we can educate our children to use this intelligently and prudently for evangelization learning. Now, I think the same thing applies to our children in the school. Now, it is going to bring in multiple complications. For example, children coming with a mobile phone to the schools, and we have, I'm sure many schools will be busy in bringing out new regulations of how to use it, how not to use it, and subsequently the connected related problems. Then you will have children should bring without a camera. Today you never get a mobile phone, smartphone without a camera. So I think all these are going to create multiple problems. I think it's very important is this Catholic or Christian education institution now itself begin to think on certain do's and don'ts of this technology in the schools. So we need to see it much ahead, how we can really handle technology related issues. So we need to be open on that. Okay, now there is one suggestion is, one question. All right. As a Christian, I am much concerned about the digital divide we may create in many ways among our students. One serious concern is the suggested online class can only give academic input, but the social learning for harmonious living is neglected. This is my concern. What do you say? Yeah, this is my concern too. I very much agree with you. That is where the creativity of the Christian educational institutions can come in. In your diocese or congregations or in your associations, can you think of how creatively we can integrate this value education along with these online classes. So I think this is very important. I think Singapore, they have attempted this in Singapore, especially the Montfort schools in Singapore, they have attempted a curriculum on this. Now, I don't think India, we have thought of this yet. So this is where I thought the pioneering effort to be made by Christian educationists in India. Yes, any other questions, please?
Yes, I go.
I have one question here.
Please say the name. Is it Sujaya?
Brother, I am Shudeep from Montfort School,
Okay,
Rani
Sudhir,
Kamar,
yes.
Agartala.
Okay.
Actually, it's not a question, but I want one suggestion that in our school, last 3 months we are having online classes to different digital platform. Okay.
Yes.
So today we had a parents teacher meeting through online
All right.
with the parents that we are discussing actually with them regarding the online assessment. So maximum like 80% of them has supported us and 20% still they are having some kind of question arising in their mind. So now my question is that the suggestion that we want that what we planned out as a school, as a committee. So are we going in the right track or is there any consequences regarding that?
Yeah. Anyway, I will not be able to give a solution to that. But what is very important is in Karnataka, the state of Karnataka, some parents of a school went to the court complaining against online education. Another group of parents went to the court in favor of online education. Okay. The court of Karnataka banned online education. Now the parents challenged it. Now the court has reverted a decision. It has come to a balanced approach to this. Now, very interestingly, the parents in India have no access to any impact study done on online classes. And I am sure many parents would love online classes for the whole day because they can be free and relaxed. There are quite a few parents who have told me that please ask your brothers to restart the schools because we are tired of having them at home for 3 months. And therefore, it is very difficult to go by the parents' style of assessment. So we have to wait and see. Therefore, assessment, I think it is a multi-pronged area. Online assessment, you are going to assess only one aspect of the intelligences. You know, there are 7 or 8 types of intelligences in a student. If we can assess only the IQ or the academic intelligences, there are many other aspects you are neglecting. Therefore, according to me personally, if you ask any psychologist in this Zoom group, they will tell you online assessment is not complete, comprehensive. It is only lopsided assessment. Yes, any other questions?
Thank you, brother.
Yes.
Palraj, it's a question from YouTube.
Please close to the mic, Brahma.
Yeah. Christian education emphasizes value-based education and online learning does not meet this aspect. What is your view?
I think I answered that already. I just answered that.
Okay.
That one Dhanraj had asked that question. I answered that. I see one President's Award winner, Ms. Reva Prasad from Lucknow. I see her there. She is the Best Teacher Award, and then our Prime Minister of India sent a greeting card to her on her birthday. So, Reva Prasad, I'm happy to see you. Do you have any question? You are a great educationist. Yes.
Thank you very much, brother. It was excellent experience to hear you. And now, one thing I would like to request you is this, that teachers are not trained for online classes.
Okay.
I can say, and then this was done in a very hasty manner. That was the need of the hour. So I request you to have conduct one seminar or teachers especially,
Okay.
how to prepare them for these online classes, because some classes are really very dull, and then students, they find it very boring. Whereas the lectures they see in YouTube, they are very interesting. These people, they have communication. They are very good in communication. So I think this is just a suggestion. Otherwise, it was an excellent experience
Okay. Thank you,
for me
Mr.
to
Srinivasa.
be here in the webinar.
Yes, thank you, and I wish to congratulate you for your President's Award, etc. That issue of
Thank you.
online class, its impact, etc. It has to be studied, and I think that some teachers have gone to the court in Karnataka that they are being paid very less for their online classes, especially private schools, private teachers, and the government has fixed the amount how much the private institution have to pay for the online class, etc. I think that is a very important issue. Yes. Any other questions? I see one. I think she is not raising. She's scratching her head. I thought she's raising her hand. Anybody else? Any other question? I think if there is no other questions, I wish to request Brother Manuel Raj, the Controller Examination of Vidyadeep College, CRA Brothers Institute, Bangalore, who is currently pursuing his doctoral studies in Bible in Pune, to propose the vote of thanks. Brother Manuel.
So, first of all, I thank all of you participants for accepting the invitation for this webinar from Vidyadeep College, Bangalore, and registering for it and attending this. Secondly, I thank Brother Basil for introducing the topic and introducing the speaker to us. Thirdly, I thank all the overseas participants for taking troubles and setting up a time for attending this webinar. Finally, I thank Brother Paul Raj for giving us a very substantial talk. Once again, on behalf of CRA Brothers Institute and Vidyadeep College, I thank for your virtual presence. See you next time. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much. Before we disperse, I want to announce now, we'll be hosting two more such programs. One on the future of religious life project in India, kind of a town hall conversation with Father Joe Manath, Brother Mani Mekunel, myself, and one or two others sometime later. And another lecture on the impact of post-COVID-19 on the students of India. So we will let you know about these details. Thank you very much for your presence, and then wish you all the best. So thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you.